Hello. It's time for us to look at another psalm. The next psalm sequentially is Psalm 53. And I have to admit that I struggled with doing that. The psalm itself is really interesting, and some of it is actually part of my own testimony. Uh, just getting into that, let me explain to you what I mean by that. Um, When I was a teenager, I was in honors classes in high school. I considered myself very smart and was with a group of other teens, a couple of whom simply said that they had no belief in God. They knew my father was a pastor, and they said they were atheists. At a certain point, I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. So I toyed with the idea of being an atheist myself. And yet I continued daily Bible readings and daily prayers. It was in that Bible reading that I read Psalm 53. That's excuse me, I read Psalm 14, which starts out, "Only fools say in their hearts there is no God." So I thought to myself, okay, uh, that's not going to do for today's reading. So I flipped over a couple of pages and came across Psalm 53. "Only fools say in their hearts there is no God." And the Lord used that to uh, end my brief foray into atheism. Um, Psalm 14 and Psalm 15 are almost exactly identical. Now, we mentioned before that there are 5 books in the book of Psalms. Uh, Psalm 14 occurs in book 1, which goes from Psalm 1 to Psalm 42. Psalm 53 occurs in book 2, which runs from Psalm 43 to Psalm 74, I think it is. But it doesn't matter. The psalm itself is repeated. Apparently, this is an important psalm. Important not only here, but also if you'll look down here in Psalm 53, "No one does good, not a single one." This is quoted in Romans 3. "Even all have turned away, all have become corrupt." That's also quoted. So the psalm in and of itself is very important. Now let's look at the comparison between Psalm 14 and Psalm 53 as we read down through it. I'm going to read Psalm 53. You follow along on the side for Psalm 14. We'll make comments when we come to the differences. "Only fools say in their heart there is no God. They're corrupt. Their actions are evil. Not one of them does good." God looks down from heaven on the entire human race. You'll see that in Psalm 14, it's the Lord, the difference between in Hebrew Elohim and Yahweh. He looks to see if anyone is truly wise, if anyone seeks God. But no, all have turned away, all have become corrupt. No one does good, not a single one. Will those who do evil never learn? They eat up my people like bread and wouldn't think of praying to God. Again in Psalm 14, to the Lord. Terror will grip them. And here is the major difference: terror like they have never known before. God will scatter the bones of your enemies. You will put them to shame, for God has rejected him. And here in Psalm 14, terror will grip them, for God is with those who obey him. The wicked frustrate the plans of the oppressed, but the Lord will protect his people. Quite different there, verse 5 and 5 and 6 in Psalm 14. Then the last verse comes back to the same, who will come from Mount Zion to rescue Israel when God restores his people in Psalm 14, when the Lord restores his people. Jacob will shout with joy and Israel will rejoice. Now, let's just go ahead, since we're looking at Psalm 53, let's spend some time here with Psalm 53. You'll notice that we start out only fools say in their heart there is no God, they're corrupt. And then starting in verse 2, God looks down. He looks to see if anyone is truly wise. But no, what he sees is that all have turned away, all have become corrupt. Verse 4, we go back to the description of the fool. Will those who do evil never learn? They eat up my people like bread. They wouldn't think of praying to God. Terror will grip them, terror like they have never known before. And then in verse, oops, that's not what I want to do. There we go. Now it's like I want. Will those who do evil never learn? They eat up my people like bread. God will scatter the bones of your enemies. So, what we see in this psalm is it jumps back and forth between the fool, the evil, and between God. The lot of the evil, their actions are evil. None of them does good. They eat up my people like bread. They wouldn't think of praying to God. Their end, terror will grip them, terror like they've never known. What God does, he looks down from heaven on the entire human race. He looks for the wise and he finds no one, absolutely no one. Nevertheless, God will scatter the bones of your enemy. You put them to shame, for God has rejected them. And the last verse then, who will come from Mount Zion to rescue Israel? God. When God restores his people, Jacob will shout with joy. Israel will rejoice. Um, it's a short psalm, a fairly simple psalm. Its message is very direct. The fools say there is no God. The fools are evil. They're corrupt. They eat up God's people like bread, but their end will be terror. God, on the other hand, looks down from heaven and he finds no one good. Now, what this is apparently saying, not even among his own people does he find anyone who is good. Nevertheless, God will restore his people. Jacob will shout with joy, and Israel will rejoice. A simple psalm with a simple message. Are there any good? No, there are none. But God does favor his people. When the evil attack his people, God will restore them. God looks for them to become the kind of people that he wants. Obviously, here, looking for them to become wise, to become the kind of person that he is looking for. see if they're wise, see if they're seeking God. That's all we have today in Psalm 53. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll come back later next week and move a little bit farther on in the book of Psalms.